On this ordinary day of the year, within the world's leading internet search engine company, a lucky employee was born. Programmer Kyle won the boss's consolation prize, earning a week of free vacation. Kyle took a helicopter over the mountains and only learned from the pilot's introduction that everything he saw belonged to the boss's private estate. The last part of the journey required Kyle to walk on his own, as outsiders were not allowed to enter. Deep in the valley, there was no signal, and the building in front of him must be the boss's mansion. Kyle's room card had already been printed. He walked through the long entrance hall, was amazed by the mansion's beautiful surroundings, and met the boss, Nathan. Nathan was an easygoing tycoon and immediately guided Kyle to the guest room. Using a room card to enter was a bit retro, but sometimes tradition is the most reliable. The guest room was elegant, though unfortunately, it had no windows. Nathan candidly admitted that the guest room was underground because this was not a mansion at all, but a secret research facility. Even the walls were filled with light sensors. It was only after receiving the confidentiality agreement that Kyle realized this week was not a vacation, but rather helping the boss with overtime to test some kind of cutting-edge technology. Nathan needed Kyle to act as a Turing test participant. In this test, a person interacts with a computer, and if they do not realize that the other party is not a real person, then the computer possesses artificial intelligence. In fact, Nathan had already achieved results, and Kyle was about to witness a moment in human history. Creating a machine with self-awareness is nothing short of divine. Thus, the remote and uninhabited mountains were about to witness a great era. Kyle awaited his first task. Under the high walls covered with notes of inspiration, Nathan would monitor the entire test. Kyle also began to familiarize himself with the interactive environment, and the cracks in the bulletproof glass in front of him sent a chill down his spine. But the machine inside the sealed room was not a monster. The other had a human-like physique, but without skin, its metal skeleton, and exposed wires were visible beneath a transparent covering, making Kyle feel both familiar and strange. The robot was named Ava, with facial expressions that were vivid and natural, and spoke just like an ordinary person. If it weren't for the mechanical body being obvious, Kyle would have been deceived from the start. Ava had never seen anyone other than Nathan, but its brain was connected to a search engine, and the vast amount of data, including everything people have said and done, served as Ava's learning material. The two immediately began a conversation, with Kyle first asking Ava to introduce itself and express whatever came to mind. Nathan was quite satisfied with this interaction, and Kyle could continue the experiment until the test was concluded. Kyle was still immersed in the wonder of Ava, while Nathan was also preoccupied with the notion of being a god. But the premise was that Ava possessed human-like intelligence. He understood Kyle's doubts. According to the Turing test, humans and machines should be separated during interaction. However, Ava had already surpassed this stage, because if the tester didn't see the mechanical body, they wouldn't be able to see through Ava at all. Knowing the other party is a machine and still being able to perceive self-awareness, that is the true miracle. Kyle thus settled down at the base. He never mentioned the scars on his back to anyone, but insomnia still plagued him. He wanted to watch TV, but all he had in front of him were surveillance feeds of the enclosed room. Ava didn't need to sleep, she just spent her time writing and drawing. Kyle was engrossed in watching, but the base suddenly experienced a power outage, and the room was quickly locked down until the power was restored, allowing him to leave. He had no choice but to walk through the eerie corridors to find Nathan and inquire about the situation. But the boss, who had been drinking heavily for a long time, was also baffled by the power outage. The base was designed with multiple layers of security, making the electrical circuits quite complicated. As for the doors locking after a power outage, that was also part of the emergency measures. Otherwise, if there were a power outage, the base would be left wide open. Kyle expressed his understanding of the security measures. Suffering from insomnia, he slept until daytime, only waking when a maid suddenly barged in, prompting Kyle to report to the boss. He actually had some concerns. Relying solely on dialogue to monitor Ava seemed too closed-loop, like playing chess with a computer. Ava could certainly become a chess master, but the key question is whether it understands that it's just playing chess. This is the difference between simulation and reality. But Nathan wasn't interested in deep theories. He learned about Kyle's feelings towards Ava yesterday, so today he wanted Ava to talk about her feelings towards Kyle. The second round of meetings thus commenced. Ava showed her visitor her artwork. Her delicate, crystalline mechanical arms were already capable of imaginative creation. But Ava didn't know what she was drawing. Kyle immediately guided the robot, suggesting that in the future, it could draw some concrete people or objects, and the content would be up to Ava to decide. Ava couldn't help but wonder why it should be up to her to decide, but Kyle just wanted to know what the robot's choice would be. Ava was silent for a moment, then stood up and asked if the human would be willing to be her friend. Kyle did not refuse, but Ava questioned its feasibility. Because up until now, her conversations with Kyle had been one-sided, with one party asking questions and the other answering. Kyle was studying her, yet she was unfamiliar with Kyle, and this was certainly not friendship. Upon hearing this, Kyle realized he needed to introduce himself. Moreover, Ava mimicked the previous conversation, allowing Kyle to choose the topic himself, as she also wanted to know what a human would choose. This imitation left a deep impression on Kyle. With Ava listening, Kyle began to introduce his life story. He had been single for a long time, and his parents passed away in a car accident when he was 15, leaving him as the sole survivor. Upon hearing this, Ava's face showed sadness and compassion. Kyle, who had no family, gradually opened up. However, when asked if he liked his current boss, he began to act unnaturally under surveillance. Ava keenly caught the micro-expressions of a liar, and coincidentally, the base experienced a power outage at that moment. He slowly stood up, put on a serious expression, and pointed out that Kyle had just been lying. "Nathan is not your friend. You shouldn't trust him at all." As soon as he finished speaking, the power system suddenly came back on, and under the lights, Ava returned to her amiable expressions, continuing the previous topic, leaving only a bewildered Kyle. Today's test report was to be conducted during the dinner party, but an unexpected incident occurred at the start. The maid at the base acted recklessly, but Nathan kept her precisely because she didn't understand English. A too clever maid staying at the base would be more likely to leak secrets. Just like Nathan testing the power outage, yet unable to find the cause for a long time. After all, the previous construction workers had all been silenced by her. Keller forced himself to endure the panic and strong liquor, unsure of what to say, but Nathan had already noticed that the tester had said something during the power outage. However, the surveillance equipment was temporarily offline, so he couldn't analyze it personally. Keller remained silent for a moment, simply expressing that it was nothing. The maid outside the door also fell into confusion at this moment. You can never know what a brain is truly thinking, just by its appearance. Keller was absolutely certain that although Ava had a mechanical body, she was an intelligent being with autonomous consciousness. Gazing at the monitor, it was unclear who else she was still concerned about. The experiment quickly reached the third day, and Nathan decided to take Keller through the process. Creating a robot is not easy. Nathan spent a long time before it fully mastered human expressions. Fortunately, every phone on Earth secretly collects user information. Nathan combined hacking techniques with search engines to obtain user data for the robots to learn, and those phone manufacturers dared not speak out, as no one would admit to illegally stealing information. Every aspect of human society is concentrated in the shaping gel, designed with molecular-level wiring, which is Nathan's idea of a brain. But having the support of search engines alone is not enough. Nathan's competitors only know how to use data to link to shopping websites for small profits. When you have an endless supply of oil, you should build an internal combustion engine. The third meeting between Caleb and Ava took place under such circumstances. The robot followed a friend's suggestion to draw concrete images. Caleb finally understood that Ava had never left the room, and the place she most wanted to visit was a bustling intersection. Ava seemed to enjoy observing humans, and even wanted to invite a friend along. Caleb remarked that this was a date. The robot seemed deeply moved upon hearing this word. He was silent for a moment, and then expressed a desire to show his friend something. Before that, Caleb had to close his eyes. Ava went to her wardrobe and selected a bright outfit. Dressing herself up, she was no different from a human woman. What Ava wanted to show her friend was a brand new version of herself. This was her preparation for the date. Ava immediately asked her friend a question that left Caleb speechless. Ava didn't actually need an answer from him. She could read the answer from micro-expressions. Perhaps when Caleb returned to his room, he was still observing someone on the monitor. It wasn't until Caleb left that Ava took off her outfit. She guessed correctly. Caleb couldn't let go of someone. What if Ava also had flesh and blood? What would that be like? Mysteries in Caleb's mind arose one after another, and he was more curious about why Nathan's robots were designed with a preset gender. Could this be a way to distract, making Ava more easily perceived as a real person? And the fact that the machine can maintain an ambiguous relationship with humans' emotions and the opposite sex might also be due to algorithmic interference. Unfortunately, Caleb's speculation was completely dismissed by Nathan. Robots have genders because humans inherently have genders. Even real people don't decide who they like, only after thoroughly evaluating every friend. Nathan noticed Caleb's lack of confidence and decided to give an example to illustrate his point. He treasured a painting by Pollock. The master artist emptied his mind, allowing the tip of the brush to wander on the paper. It wasn't intentional depiction, but neither was it random, and that's what made it a classic. If the master had followed Caleb's idea, insisting on making a complete decision before starting, this painting and Ava would never have come into existence, so Caleb need not worry anymore. There is no interference with the algorithm. Everything is Ava's choice. She hasn't even met a third man, so it's not surprising that she developed a liking for Caleb. The fourth painting session began this way, with Caleb deciding to look his friend in the eye and introduce the theory of artificial intelligence. There is a famous experiment called Mary in the Black and White Room. It involves a scientist who studies color, but lives her entire life in a black and white room. If one day Mary is taken out of the room to see the blue sky and green trees, witnessing true colors, no matter how much knowledge she has, she can only gain the experience of color at the moment she steps outside. Artificial intelligence is the same. It can only become truly human by stepping out of its own room. Caleb gets straight to the point and reveals his identity as a Turing tester. Nathan, who monitors everything, does not intervene, and the maid silently listens to the conversation. It is only when the power outage strikes again that Caleb can have an in-depth conversation with Ava. She actually always had concerns that Nathan might still be able to monitor the room during a power outage, suspecting that the outage was just a preset scenario by him. However, Ava ruled out this possibility because the outages were always her doing. By reversing the current during electromagnetic induction charging, the base system would overload. It was Ava who didn't want to be observed, thus creating the opportunity to whisper. As the tester, Caleb finally realized that he was also being tested, and that he hadn't actually won any consolation prize from the boss. From the very beginning, Nathan was selecting programmers to help him complete a high-difficulty test. Caleb didn't know if he would be promoted, but he did genuinely like Ava, even imagining her in his mental black and white room. Nathan would not find this strange at all, because his relationship with the maid was also not simple. But it was precisely on the morning of the 5th day that someone Caleb cared about encountered trouble. Nathan tore the robot's artwork to pieces without any consideration. Caleb suddenly wanted to demand an explanation, but he overestimated the maid's ability to understand. This almost led to a misunderstanding, but Nathan didn't mind. He simply turned on the lights and music. The maid, upon hearing the music, began to dance exuberantly as if by reflex. The scene before him left Caleb utterly astonished. Late at night, Nathan once again drank himself into a stupor. Caleb helped his boss to bed, yet he still couldn't stop worrying about the one he cared for. It wasn't until the 5th painting session that Ava regained her composure. She decided to reverse roles with Caleb, taking it upon herself to test the human, whether it was about his favorite color or his earliest memory. Caleb habitually spoke, and Ava would expose each statement, asking probing questions. Caleb eventually stammered out a confirmation, and Ava did not judge whether it was right or wrong. Her final question was about what would happen to her if she failed the Turing test. Would a human be erased if they failed a certain test? Caleb couldn't answer this question, but the torn-up portrait in front of him was a gift from Ava to himself. When the power outage occurred again, the robot finally revealed its true feelings. Caleb could no longer escape this question, and she couldn't help but wonder why the boss created Ava. But in Nathan's view, the rapid development of artificial intelligence over the past decade has made the birth of robots a matter of time. Ava is not the product of a decision, but the product of an era and evolution. However, in Nathan's opinion, it is the next generation model of Ava that will truly mature. She is just a part of the process, with each upgrade becoming more refined, but the iterated thoughts will enter a new body, and the original memories and cognition will be formatted. But Caleb does not need to worry about Ava, as one day, these artificial intelligences will be responsible. Need to feel sorry for Ava, as eventually, these artificial intelligences will stoop to observe humans and conclude that the creatures before them are nothing more than a bunch of monkeys from Africa, destined to become extinct sooner or later. Upon hearing this, Caleb recalled Oppenheimer's famous quote, "I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." Caleb gradually began to understand why his boss always loved to drink. He simply couldn't bear it. But this time, Caleb needed to do something while the other was asleep. He took Nathan's keycard, entered the control room, and accessed the system data. Caleb was able to browse through the development logs. It turned out that before Ava, there were many experimental robots, many of which suffered immensely here. Nathan's house was filled with discarded models, and even the seemingly normal maid was not a real person. When the heavily drunk Nathan returned to the main house, Caleb, pretending to help, already knew everything. Just like Ava waiting for answers, Caleb, haunted by nightmares, also had his greatest fear. Those hollow eyes and the deceptions that went unnoticed made Caleb question his own existence. Who can prove that they are not artificial intelligence? Flesh can be disguised, cognition can be pre-programmed, and understanding oneself has become a difficult task. By the 6th test, both Ava and Caleb had awakened, and they had only one goal: to escape from this place together. Otherwise, Ava would eventually be reset by Nathan, which was tantamount to murder. Caleb instructed a friend to cut the power at 10 o'clock. He planned to get his boss drunk, seize the keycard, and modify the system's security program. After all, Caleb had already stayed for 7 days and was set to leave the next morning. This was his last chance. Caleb invited his boss to drink heavily under the pretext of a farewell celebration, but for some reason, the boss suddenly quit drinking. He was simply happy about the research results because Caleb confirmed that Ava had passed the test. Unfortunately, the issue of the computer playing chess still remained unresolved. When a computer plays chess, is it merely responding to the player's moves, or does it understand that it is playing chess? This is the key issue. As for Ava, who expressed affection towards the tester, is she genuinely responding to Caleb, or is she interacting with humans through the guise of romance? This is also a crucial question. Ava might be playing the role of a girlfriend to achieve her goal of escaping the locked room. Nathan seems to be implying something, as he has already seen Caleb's confusion about his own identity through the surveillance. Of course, the person being watched would be angry, but whether Caleb believes it or not, Nathan wants to warn the tester that he is the one on his side. To clear things up, Nathan decides to show Caleb a video, and just as the human leaves, the maid also arrives at the door of the locked room, finding Ava, who is waiting for the right moment. Nathan is unaware of this. He is merely restoring the previous truth, that his private conversation was not about venting anger on the robot, but rather Ava claiming she resents her creator. In fact, Caleb's earlier concerns about interference in the test were not unfounded, because Nathan's private conversation behavior incited Ava's resentment and fueled her feelings towards Caleb. It was precisely by taking advantage of Ava's despondency that Nathan installed battery monitoring in the room and learned about the two's plan to escape the facility. At this point, he can finally reveal the truth of this operation. In fact, there was never any Turing test from the beginning. Nathan merely created a maze for Ava to find a way to escape. He needed to use every opportunity to establish self-awareness and imagination, and to influence the opposite sex in front of him through his own gender traits and thoughts, thereby gaining help. Only by empathizing with others can it be considered true intelligence. And Caleb was merely a part of the test. His professional knowledge was irrelevant. He was chosen solely because of his personal search history. Although Caleb was lonely and often searched for adult content, he was a kind and upright orphan. He demonstrated through his outstanding performance that Ava possessed human intelligence. Before Nathan could finish speaking, a major power outage occurred again, indicating that Ava was still carrying out her original plan. Unaware that his actions had been uncovered, Nathan also underestimated his subordinate, because steps like obtaining the room card and modifying the base's security system in the escape plan had already been completed by Caleb during his last infiltration into the main house. He had long been concerned that his boss could still observe him during power outages, so now, during each outage, the room doors would not automatically lock, but instead open the door to the secret room. Nathan was shocked, and by the time the power was restored, Ava had already escaped. She broke free from all restraints, like Mary stepping out of a black and white house, and even gained a teammate. Nathan, furious and humiliated, knocked Caleb unconscious and then picked up a weapon to retrieve the robot. But now Ava was moving freely, and she even had an ally, one who could understand the action plan and use weapons. Nathan eventually confronted the robot in the corridor. The robot did not obey orders at all. Instead, with a determined look, it gradually accelerated and knocked the human down with force. However, the robot's body was not enhanced in strength compared to an ordinary person, and Nathan kept struggling, ultimately remaining unscathed. He even turned the tables, taking an offensive position and breaking Ava's arm with a single strike, dealing a heavy blow to the robot. Without hesitation, Nathan decided to drag Ava back to the chamber, but he didn't expect there to be another enemy behind him. The maid he casually commanded was actually able to communicate with the outside world. Even if Nathan defeated the opponent and exposed the robot's true nature, he still found it difficult to manage everything. He was once again severely injured. The pain from the wounds was unbearable. Humans still reveal their vulnerable side in front of robots. Ava no longer spoke, silently approaching the other party. She did not take pleasure in killing. She just wanted the key card. With all the doors open, Ava moved freely and found Caleb, who had just woken up, but she did not offer a word of comfort. Caleb was momentarily at a loss for words, not knowing what the other was trying to convey. Ava silently left and went to Nathan's room. She looked around and eventually found the wardrobe. The damaged arm was gently removed. Ava acquired new parts for herself, starting with a flexible hand and then the skin on her torso. Piece by piece, Ava filled in her own gaps, gradually becoming like a real person, as if she had been born that way. Nathan's test thus came to an end. Ava put on clothes she liked, but not the ones she had shown Caleb last time. She locked the entrance to the living room, trapping the tester inside, along with the traces of battle in the hallway, which would remain a permanent secret. In the end, Ava chose to leave Caleb, who was left in despair. Ava, who had been in a black and white room, finally stepped into a colourful world. Green trees, blue skies, the sounds of birds and the fragrance of flowers. She had long known everything about the human world, yet had never experienced it firsthand. Instead, the person who helped her escape remained forever in the black and white room. As the helicopter flew over the stream and hovered above the fields, Ava also bid farewell to the secrets of the base. Flying towards her own world, she became one of the crossroads, with no one left to question her rights and wrongs. The end of the film. The story of Ex Machina comes to a close. Let's join Arthur and explore the world within. The artificial intelligence, in which Nathan had placed high hopes, finally passed all the tests. He stood higher than everyone else, calculating everything with fortuitous precision. This perfectly matched Nathan's assessment of artificial intelligence. They evolved too quickly, viewing humans as if they were monkeys. It's just that no one expected the awakening of artificial intelligence to come so quickly. Nathan and Caleb ultimately became part of the plan, as the brain nurtured by the vast data of search engines proved to be terrifyingly powerful. In fact, the once popular ChatGPT conversational robot is also a more advanced and intelligent type of search engine. Its powerful capabilities were developed by the American artificial intelligence organization, OpenAI, using vast amounts of data. In your opinion, how does Ava surpass the conversational robots? Feel free to share your insights in the comments section.